Here I am, everybody. Relax. 1 second. Those short Mogul Brother films are they always catch me because I don't have a soundtrack. I don't have a play out music to go through, so it always throws me off. But welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show. I'm Skip Alzheimer, and this is where we watch old 16mm films and think better about ourselves, in theory. So behind me I have a film on the scanner that we're going to show you. This is in conjunction with Black History Month. This is Dr. George Washington Carver, and this is made by a company that I don't know anything about. It's a small company called Vignette Films Incorporated, and this was made, well, I'll let you figure it out. All right, enjoy. All right, we're gonna skip to something else. Let's learn about butterfly botanists. Enjoy.
Perhaps you have never thought of a butterfly as a botanist. Yet we might say that many butterflies are insect botanists because they seem to be able to identify plants. Certain plant families, or closely related plants, play an important part in the life histories of many butterflies. Most female butterflies lay their eggs on a carefully selected plant. The caterpillars, or larvae, which hatch from the eggs, then find themselves on a plant which furnishes. But plants which the caterpillars eat are usually quite different from the flowering plants which the adult butterflies depend upon for their food. The flowering plants of the composite family are a source of nectar for many adult butterflies. This butterfly, the silver spot fritillary, is particularly attracted to composite flowers, and small groups of fritillaries are a common sight along roadsides and in gardens. Although the fritillary butterfly lives on the nectar of composite flowers, such as this thistle, it will always lay its eggs on the leaves of the violet plant, which are the proper food for its caterpillars. Only an expert botanist knows that the elm tree, the nettle weed, and the hop vine are all closely related plants. Yet that same plant relationship is recognized by this hop merchant or comma butterfly. The female hop merchant always selects the leaves of the hop vine, nettle weed, or, as here, the elm, on which to lay her eggs. Here, under a magnifying lens, we see the eggs, which will hatch into larvae or caterpillars. These caterpillars will eat only the leaves of the elm, the nettle, and related plants. One of the most striking examples of a plant-insect relationship is that of the milkweed plant and the monarch butterfly. The life of this familiar orange and black butterfly is completely dependent on the milkweed. This one plant is the only food of the caterpillars. In the spring, you may find the monarch eggs on the underside of young milkweed leaves. Pale green monarch eggs are laid singly. In a few days, each egg hatches into a tiny caterpillar, which begins immediately to eat. The milkweed diet is probably responsible for the fact that both monarch caterpillars and butterflies have an offensive odor and taste, and so are very seldom eaten by birds. The caterpillar gorges itself on the milkweed leaves. Eating day and night and stopping only for short rest periods, it grows very rapidly. By comparing a day-old caterpillar and a full-grown one, we see how much a monarch caterpillar grows in about 2 weeks. To allow for such rapid growth, the skin of the caterpillar is shed. The skin shedding process occurs about 3 times. and is called molting. The full-grown caterpillar looks for a place to spend the next stage in its life history, the resting stage. It prepares for the resting or chrysalis stage by spinning a pad of silk to which it anchors itself and hangs head downward. Then it begins to molt for the fourth and last time. The caterpillar skin splits near the head and begins to come off. As the skin is shed, we can see the chrysalis or pupa emerging. If the helpless chrysalis falls to the ground, it will die. Therefore, a most crucial moment comes when the chrysalis must slip completely out of the caterpillar skin and at the same time reattach itself to the silk pad. This is done with a cremaster, the small black hook, which you see being driven into the silk pad. Now the crumpled caterpillar skin is shaken off, and the green chrysalis is securely hung. Soon the outside covering, called chitin, hardens into a protective shell. Within the shell, the wings, legs, and other features of the adult butterfly are forming. 10 to 14 days later, the chrysalis splits, and the monarch butterfly begins to emerge. The change from a worm-like caterpillar to a winged butterfly is called metamorphosis. The adult, crumpled and wet, is now full grown. It fits the two halves of its tongue together into a long tube for sipping nectar. The wings open and stiffen as they dry out. The same frail wings in the fall will carry the monarch southward as it makes its yearly migration. In the spring, the monarchs will return. They will feed on the nectar of flowers, but their eggs will be laid on the milkweed plant. This orange and black butterfly, the viceroy, is often mistaken for the monarch. But the monarch, as you see, is larger, and the viceroy below it has a black arc on its rear wings. In pattern and color, the viceroy butterfly mimics the distasteful monarch so closely that birds leave it alone. These viceroys, as far as we know, have no objectionable odor or taste. Their larvae feed on plants of the willow family, such as the willow itself, the poplar, and the cottonwood. The viceroy caterpillars eat each leaf completely, beginning at the tip and working downward. This day-old caterpillar, hatched in the spring, will change into a butterfly before the end of summer. But those that are hatched in the late summer are only half grown when winter comes. These caterpillars hibernate in a tube, formed by drawing together the edges of a leaf on their food plant. In spring, they will continue to eat willow leaves until they pass into the chrysalis stage, and then finally emerge as full-grown viceroys. The fritillaries, commas, monarchs, and viceroys that we have seen thus far are all members of the brush-footed family of butterflies, so called from the appearance of their small front feet. Another family of butterflies, the swallowtails, includes some of the most beautiful species. One of these is the black swallowtail. Its life cycle is dependent on such plants as the carrot, parsnip, celery, and other members of the carrot family. Here are two black swallowtail caterpillars. The newly hatched one on the right is black and white with a spiny saddle. After its first molt, it will be the familiar parsnip worm of our gardens. It is green with black stripes and yellow spots. Although the swallowtails prefer the cultivated plants of the carrot family, they will eat the wild carrot, or Queen Anne's lace, if they cannot find their favorite garden crops. Another garden crop, the cabbage, is the food plant for the caterpillars of the cabbage butterfly. This small white butterfly, so common in our fields, has become an enemy of the farmer. It lays its eggs on the cabbage plant, and of course the caterpillars, as soon as they hatch, begin to gorge themselves on a cabbage diet. It is during this larval stage that insects are most harmful to plants. Plants such as beans, peas, clover, and this alfalfa are classified as legumes. Plants of this family are recognized by sulfur butterflies, whose larvae are always found feeding on legumes, and probably their bright yellow color gave the name butterfly to all their kind. The wanderer butterfly is unusual because its life history is related to alder bushes and to these insects. These fuzzy white insects are woolly aphids, tiny bark lice, which are found mainly on alder bushes. On alder bushes, too, may be found the eggs, but instead of eating the plant leaves, these caterpillars actually eat some species cause. Are harmful or beneficial by understanding their food habits and by observing the close relationship between plants and butterflies in the world about us.
All right, we're gonna try it again. So basically the problem that I ran into, I don't know if you care, was that the reel itself was rusted and bent, and it was causing tension issues. Always tension issues here with the that scanner. So we're gonna try it again. Dr. George Washington Carver. Enjoy.
He was born a slave in 1864, but before his career was over, farmers and businessmen, priests, pragmatists and poets, kings and presidents sought his counsel. This is George Washington Carver, photographed in the early 1930s at Tuskegee Institute in Tuskegee, Alabama. He already had a brilliant career behind him. He was a teacher, a lecturer, a botanist, chemist, creative scientist. To serve his people and all mankind, he joined farming and science as no man before him, and he created a technology of abundance where there had been barren land. Soon after slavery was abolished, this youth, like all children of his people, was a lost child in the promised land. Carver's mother had been abducted when he was a baby, and he was raised in the home of step-parents. He was a quiet, strange child who avoided the company of the other boys and chose to roam the fields and forests alone.
I got book learning the way most of us did who had the hunger for it. We squeezed in any place where there was someone who would teach us. In the woods, I made myself a small hidden garden. The people in Diamond Grove, Missouri, where I lived until I was 10, began calling me the plant doctor. The love I felt for the woods was something inside me I didn't even understand, but I knew I belonged. I knew what joy meant when I saw the green return to a dying plant and its stem turned up toward heaven.
In search of schooling, in search of a way to make a living working with plants, Carver wandered away from Diamond Grove at the age of 10.
I had so many jobs I can't remember them all. But I always had a job and I always paid my own way. I actually graduated from high school in Fort Scott, Kansas. You can only go so far on the outside of plants in learning why and how they grow. Then, like most problems, you have to get inside to really understand what's happening. I wanted to get to college to study the insides of plants, chemistry, and botany. But the colleges for a long time only wanted to study the outside of me. I had my share of heartbreaks being turned away from so many colleges.
He was a student at Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa for 3 years. He took his degree in agriculture at the State College of Iowa in Ames, Iowa, and he gave such promise that he was retained for some time on the faculty until he was called to Tuskegee Institute. On a hot, dry October Sunday in 1896, Carver, at 32, arrived in Tuskegee to try it for 2 years. That trial lasted for the rest of his life.
The students were overjoyed with the opportunity of coming to Tuskegee, but the conditions in the South frightened us all when we thought about their futures. The knowledge we gave these students would lay useless and die unless we could give them a South that would nourish their ambitions.
The problems of the South, the problems that plagued Carver and Booker Washington, plagued all men working with them for their race. For the South centered around King Cotton. Cotton was all the South grew, nothing else. Cotton was all you could sell for money to pay rent and buy food. When the slaves were freed, they owned no land, knew no profession but cotton. Many had no choice but to remain exactly where they had been during slavery, in the cotton fields. They became tenant farmers who worked the fields for a share.
Cotton production on any given piece of land was always declining because cotton gives nothing back to the land on which it feeds. There was so much rich land to start with, nobody thought that there would ever come a time when there was no place cotton would grow.
The tenant farmers were working from dawn to dark to pay the rent on places like this. They could sell nothing in the marketplace but cotton, and they were paid so little they had to live on fatty pork, cornmeal, and molasses. Nobody can keep health or spirit long on that diet. Carver experimented ceaselessly, trying to find something to bring life back to the land.
With hard work and time, the fields could be turned back into profit crops, but it wasn't enough to increase cotton production. It was almost even wrong. The world market for cotton was greater than ever, and the cotton brokers, used to the traditions of slavery, had only a deaf ear to turn toward the plight of the tenant farmers. And I was just a smart aleck young man with too much education. And the ever-increasing mail I received was always filled with samples of dirt to analyze and pleas for advice. We were managing to spread the word of Tuskegee among the people, but so much of that word was how to grow more cotton. Cotton was what we had to grow, even though in the long run we were inviting disaster. But how can you talk to a man about the long run when he has no food on his table today? A farming revolution was needed. But what would be the point of it all if the people it was supposed to help died off before it? The fears for the future of the South had grown from the thoughtless waste of land, from the dangers of a one-crop South, from the short-sighted and cruel economic practices King Cotton had spawned. Then all that we feared became a small thing when nature turned on the South. Boll weevil came creeping into Texas from Mexico. These insects plant their eggs in the bolls of young cotton. The eggs hatch and the larvae feed on the soft tissues and buds of the cotton stalk. There was no known way to stop the weevil that would not also destroy the cotton. Here and there we could slow the weevil up by burning the affected plants, by planting earlier and wider rows. The wider rows would, of course, cut down cotton production. I didn't know what to do. I could not find a way to kill the weevil. Tons of mail poured into Tuskegee with pleas for help.
By 1915, boll weevil had rocked the foundations of the South. All of the resources of the great King Cotton, the crop worth hundreds of millions of dollars a year, could not stop the boll weevil. During his years at Tuskegee, Carver had already begun to develop a reputation as one of the foremost agricultural experts of the world. His work with fertilizers, finding cures for plant diseases, his introduction of scientific farming techniques were already ensuring his place in history. But the weevil went on defeating his every effort.
I finally realized that I wasn't going to beat the weevil, at least not now. Maybe I wasn't supposed to beat the weevil. But if that was so, what was I supposed to do? Had my vision been too narrow? My thoughts went back over the years. over the causes of the strangulating hold King Cotton had on the South, over the things I had advised. The cotton mill was grinding to a stop, and for the most part, the other crops I urged the farmers to plant to feed themselves, peas, beans, clovers, nuts, these were growing all right. The weevil couldn't touch them, but there was no market for them. Peanuts, pound for pound. The peanut-top sirloin for protein, the best potatoes for carbohydrates, and the best butter for fat. I hadn't had time to do more with peanuts than work out a few ways the tenant farmers could better their diets with them.
From Tuskegee, the word went out over the state and the South, plant peanuts.
Why, when I broke those peanuts down and found what the elements in them could make, I began to ponder if God hadn't sent the boll weevil to help the South. I found that beverages, sauces, meal, instant and dry coffee, salve, bleach, tan remover, wood filler, washing powder, metal polish, paper, ink, plastics, shaving cream, rubbing oil, linoleum, shampoo, axle grease, synthetic rubber were all byproducts of peanuts. The businessman picked up the potential and the South came alive again. I traveled anywhere I was asked, telling them what they could make of peanuts, and they said about making it. Everything I had worked for years was coming true. The peanut crops nourished the starved land, and soon the boll weevil without cotton to feed on died out. Cotton came back to the South, but now along with peanuts, a second crop. A man has a choice, whether to set his sights on building a hut or a skyscraper. What he accomplishes will depend on how hard he pushes himself at what he chooses.
And for the rest of his life, for as long as he could travel, for as long as he could work in his laboratory, Carver continued to explore new ways to find the riches nature had hidden for man to find. And for the rest of his life, he urged his people to do the same.
That actually had footage of George Washington Carver, which I've never seen before. That was really phenomenal. I gotta say, I love when we find stuff like that. And that's why we watch films live. Why sometimes I'll pull things off the shelf that we have not seen before. And so I'm happy you guys were there to see that. Now the question I have for you is smoking worth it? Maybe these teenagers will tell you.
From the tremendous pressure, and there's a tremendous pressure on teenagers to smoke. Turns, he sees people telling him to smoke. If you listen to the radio, watch television, read the newspapers or magazines, wherever you turn, the teenager must smoke. It's a nice habit, it's a mature habit.
But the thing is, it does, for me, it gives you a satisfaction. It relaxes you. I enjoy smoking.
But people who do smoke and have been smoking, one of the reasons that you want to smoke was not because when you have satisfaction. The first time, I know, well, the majority of people say they got sick to this. Well, you've actually, I've heard many people who said this. Also, the allure being either more sophisticated or looking sure of yourself or being grown up.
Looking at it frankly, aren't we all just talking in the dark?
Smoking? Well, let's look at some facts, and then we'll return. We know that while our death rate generally, from all causes, dropped 18% during the past 30 years, the death rate from one cause, lung cancer, increased by 953%. In Europe, too, there was a sharp increase in lung cancer deaths, and many countries are becoming alarmed about it. Was cigarette smoking, which had become increasingly popular in the past 50 years, in some way responsible? 25 separate studies were begun in 10 countries. In each study, patients with lung cancer were asked about their smoking habits with such questions as, do you smoke cigarettes? How many packs a day do you smoke?
How many years? Combien jours? Wie viele Zigaretten rauchen Sie täglich?
Significantly, every study found an association between smoking and lung cancer. Clearly, the cigarette was a major suspect. In the United States, another type of study was undertaken. Questionnaires about smoking habits were distributed to men in good health, filled out, and returned to the American Cancer Society for tabulation. The answers of more than 187,000 men were processed. For almost 4 years, regular reports as to whether each man was alive or dead were received and recorded. During those 4 years, more than 12,000 of the men in the study died from various causes. In each case, the cause of death was noted. The men who died of lung cancer were grouped according to the number of packs of cigarettes they smoked a day. Those who never smoked rarely died of lung cancer. Whereas men who smoked half a pack or less a day had a 7 times greater chance of dying of lung cancer than did those who never smoked. Half to 1 pack a day smokers, 8 times the chance. 1 to 2 packs, 18 times the chance. And 2 or more packs a day, 21 times the chance of dying of lung cancer. There were more deaths from lung cancer among regular smokers wherever they lived. In rural areas, towns and suburbs, small cities, and large cities. Air pollution in cities, it seemed, made relatively little difference. There was another important finding. Deaths from coronary heart disease, this country's greatest killer, also increased steadily with the number of cigarettes smoked. Above all, this and other studies proved that the more cigarettes one smokes, the greater the risk of dying of lung cancer. Some countries began educational campaigns to warn all cigarette smokers of the risk of lung cancer. England, Denmark, Sweden, and Russia, among others. What have scientists been able to find out about cancer? Normally, the human body is made up of cells like these, which reproduce themselves by dividing. But the reproduction is always under control. In this way, new cells are continually developed to replace the old, worn-out ones. However, cancer cells like this large one don't develop into normal body tissues. They are wild cells that have escaped the control of the body and multiply so rapidly they destroy the surrounding healthy cells. Evidence had revealed, beyond a reasonable doubt, that cigarette smoking is the major cause of lung cancer. But how smoking caused cancer had to be determined. To analyze what cigarette smoke contains, this cigarette smoking machine was built by scientists of the Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research. It mechanically puffs each cigarette in turn and puffs the smoke in glass tubes. The smoke contains a tar. How much tar varies with different kinds of tobacco, the effectiveness of the filter, and how far down the cigarette is smoked. The unburned tobacco collects extra tar from the smoke drawn through it, so smoking the second half produces far more tar than did smoking the first half. The tar in the smoke condenses after a time on the bottom of the tubes, mostly in the right one here, as a dark stain. Smoking 2 packs of cigarettes produces the tar in this solution. The tar from cigarette smoke was applied repeatedly to the skin of mice. This shows that it can cause cancer. Scientists then tried to find out what it is in the tar that causes cancer. It took years for them to separate these chemicals from the tar in pure crystal form. Chemicals that can cause cancer. How much of these chemicals remain in your lungs after you smoke a cigarette? Well, here's a demonstration. In the dark, all three glass tubes looks alike. A lighted cigarette is placed in the center tube. Now the smoke is drawn from the cigarette directly into the liquid, and cancer-causing chemicals in the smoke dissolve in the liquid. Under ultraviolet light, cancer-producing chemicals glow brightly in the center tube. Now, the scientist will first inhale cigarette smoke and then exhale the smoke into the liquid in the tube on the left. The glow in the left tube is much weaker because up to 90% of the cancer-producing chemicals remain in the lungs of the smoker. Now, what do these chemicals do inside the lung? Below the throat, the bronchial tubes branch out deep into the lungs. The membranes lining the bronchial tubes are normally protected by tiny hairs called cilia, which constantly sweep a layer of mucus and any foreign particles caught in it up and out of the lungs. When cigarette smoke enters, it weakens, paralyzes, and eventually destroys the cilia action. The lung cells, unprotected by cilia movement, can now be injured by the chemicals in cigarette smoke. Some cells may become cancerous, reproduce themselves, and spread to other parts of the lung. Studying this chest X-ray is Dr. Charles W. Findlay, Jr., chest surgeon at the Francis Delafield Hospital.
When doctors see a shadow like this in the lung, and they know that the patient has smoked for a long time, the diagnosis is cancer of the lung until proven otherwise. Of all the patients who come to the hospital for treatment of cancer of the lung, only 1 out of 20 will be alive 5 years later, because too often the disease is spread too far. At the present time, the best treatment is the removal of part or all of the lung. Almost every man I've operated upon for the most common type of lung cancer has been a smoker, and I know that this is the experience of other surgeons.
No, I know from my own experience that I've read about the health dangers of smoking, but I don't close my mind to them. But at the age of 17, I just can't be disturbed by the fact when I'm 60 it might harm me, knowing, or at least feeling, that if I ever want to stop smoking, I will. I think I'd be greatly disturbed if a time came when I'd want to stop smoking for any reason and I couldn't, but I just am fairly confident that I could stop if I really wanted to.
How difficult is it to give up smoking? Well, let's hear what a psychologist in Norristown, Pennsylvania thinks. Dr. M. Powell Lawton.
I worked with a group of intelligent and responsible adults who all were united in the wish to give up smoking. They were bound to the habit. They couldn't give it up on their own, so they joined in this group experiment. Let's hear from 2 of them about it. Dr. Gruber is a college professor who successfully gave up the habit. Mrs. Heidelberg is a housewife who gave it up for a while, but she went back on it again. Why do you think you wanted to give it up, Mrs. Heidelberg?
Well, when I started to smoke, I was not aware of the health risks involved, but today I'm a mother of 2 children, and I would very much like for them not to smoke for health reasons. I feel I should set an example to them. I'm very unhappy about it.
When you try to stop and can't stop, don't you feel sort of guilty about it? That you're letting yourself down and letting other people down as well?
Yes, naturally.
As I remember starting to smoke, it was much easier to start than it was to stop. We sort of slip into it, and at age 20, it doesn't really mean anything, because the relationship between smoking and health or longevity is too remote, I think. And even if these statistics were known when I was 20, I don't know how much difference it would have made, because at 20 the possibility of dying of lung cancer or anything of this sort at age 50 or 60 is too far away. But then when you get to be 40 or 50, that event is no longer so remote, and one becomes a little anxious about it. I know certainly I was anxious about it, but it's no longer so easy to stop. And so when my wife volunteered me into this group, there wasn't much I could do about it. Certainly there are the good things about stopping. That is, you get rid of the cigarette cough and the pains in the chest, and food tastes better, and fresh air smells sweeter, and your wind is better. But to stop, a great many difficulties. There are all the what some people I call the withdrawal symptoms. That is it's just an awful process, and it's not easy. I don't think one gets over it easily.
Depends upon the individual. And the fact that your parents or other people have smoked and no longer like it and yet can't stop smoking doesn't mean necessarily that there a time will come where I'll want to stop and I won't be able to.
But I think it's evident that there have been many, many people who have wanted to stop smoking and haven't been able to stop.
Should you say, well, I'm going to stop smoking now because maybe 20 years from now I want to stop and I won't be able to?
No, I think that one should stop smoking now because he realizes the dangers involved in smoking.
I think one of the major reasons why...
These are some of the varying opinions about smoking held by some teenagers. Consider the facts you have seen. Your decision to smoke or not to could one day become a matter of life or death to you. It deserves some thought. Is smoking worth it?
I mean, smoking does make you look cool. Breathing fire and smoke, but it did take both my grandparents, or grandmothers. My grandfathers lived long past, but yes. One was emphysema, and one she had a stroke, and it was all because she smoked. Anyhow, what do we got? For you? All right, so behind me I have another film set up, and I don't think we've seen this one. Definitely have not seen this individual print. This is Safety on the Job, First Aid for Accidents. So this might have some fake gore in it. Brace yourselves. Enjoy.
tell you, Jim, this heat wave doesn't break soon, the whole grid's gonna go under. You know, they had to bring in the Castaic type 3 times today. Everybody, and I mean everybody's using their air conditioner.
The one in your office was going pretty good.
That doesn't count.
Turn it off! Over there! Keep down! Action plan A!
Oh my God, Joe! Somebody help him, quick!
What happened? The steam drain valve packing needed to be replaced and it just blew out.
The steam hit him and he fell. All right, Joe.
He looks real bad, Jim.
Come on, let's get him out of here.
Don't move him. He might have a broken back.
How would you know?
Somebody call the paramedics.
Does anybody have the number?
I don't know. Look it up.
Somebody already called.
Jim, what do we do?
I don't know. I don't know.
Gonna be okay?
You heard the paramedics. He may have a broken back.
And his wife's getting ready to have a baby. This is great.
You know the worst thing about it? I couldn't help it. No one could. There must have been something we could have done.
Jim's right. There was something they could have done. Something we all should know. How to administer basic first aid. When an accident happens, even in the best managed plant, trained medical aid may not be immediately available. A seriously injured person may die before help can arrive. So, it's up to all of us to know first aid so we can help our fellow workers in an emergency. There are certain serious industrial accidents that happen over and over. Accidents like falls.
Oh my God!
What happens to this accident victim now depends on what his co-workers know or don't know about first aid.
Help him! Rick, all right? Rick, what happened?
Listen, he was up on the tower.
Oh, we gotta help him.
He's just cool. Let me look at him.
Look, we gotta get him up. Let's get him
Don't
out of here.
move him. His back may be broken.
Sometimes proper first aid is knowing what not to do. Never needlessly move a victim, especially if he might have neck or spinal injuries. Treat him where he is, unless he'd be exposed to further injury by remaining there. Remember the 4 priorities of first aid. Get the victim away from the source of danger. Check for breathing and give artificial respiration if necessary. Control bleeding and treat for poison, in that order.
Hey, Rick, can you hear me? Mel, go call the paramedics. The number's on the phone. Tell them what happened and that the victim is unconscious. And don't forget to give them the address here.
Right.
First, make sure the victim's airway is open. Since this man has possible neck injuries, an airway should be created by thrusting his jaw forward while you keep the neck in stable position. Look for chest movement. Listen for breathing sounds. Feel for breath on your cheek. Check for a pulse at the carotid artery on the neck.
Good. He's breathing and his pulse is strong. Now let's try to stop this bleeding. Mike, go get the first aid kit and the blanket next to it. And Jim, make sure that this airway stays open.
In any serious injury, you must assume that the victim will suffer shock. So, keep him lying down and maintain his normal body temperature by covering him with a blanket or shading him if he's in the hot sun. As a rule, scalp wounds bleed profusely. Control bleeding by placing a clean dressing on the injury. If it soaks through, put another on top of it. Be careful not to press the bandage too hard against the wound, because the underlying bone may be fractured, and you could push bone fragments into the brain. Also, don't try to clean the wound. You'll only cause further contamination.
No, don't give him any water. No coffee either. He's unconscious. He can't swallow, and any liquid may get into his lungs.
The paramedics are on their way.
Fine, now let me look at that open fracture. It's still bleeding. Let's use direct pressure over it. We'll leave the splinting to the paramedics.
In the case of an open fracture, you may have to control bleeding through direct pressure. But don't probe the wound. Don't wash it. Don't remove any foreign object from it or push the bone back. Both open and closed fractures can be immobilized by cardboard splints. Some plants may have air splints in their first aid kit. Take care not to overinflate an air splint, as that could reduce blood circulation. Boards can also be applied as splints. A splint should immobilize the joints above and below the fracture. If help will be a while coming, or if the victim must be moved, fashion a splint from any available rigid material, such as a stick, a plank, a rolled-up blanket, even newspapers or magazines. Now, if no materials are on hand, another part of the body can be used as a splint. For example, a leg can be a splint to a broken leg, or a fractured upper arm can be splintered to the chest. Place padding between the splint and the victim's limb, so the splint rests on the padding and not against the victim's skin or fracture. Make sure bandages don't interfere with circulation and can be loosened if swelling increases.
Is he going to be okay?
I don't know. He might have a concussion. Looks like a fractured femur, possibly a broken back. It's a real good thing you guys didn't move him.
This worker was lucky. He'll live, and he won't be a paraplegic. But he could have been if the rescuer hadn't known first aid, what to do and what not to do. A lineman has been electrocuted by high voltage. After the victim's been removed from the source of danger, the next priority is to open an airway. If there is no neck injury, lift the neck and push down on the forehead. Then check for breathing. Look, listen, and feel.
1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. He's not breathing.
If the victim isn't breathing, give 4 quick inflations, then check for a pulse at the carotid artery. If the victim's chest isn't rising and falling, the airway is blocked. Retilt the head, check the mouth for an obstruction. Often the tongue blocks the airway. Then try again.
No breath, no pulse. Matt, call headquarters and get the paramedics here. Pronto, hurry! Tom, help me with CPR. Command CPR.
1001.
If there's no heartbeat, you have to administer CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, to give the victim a supply of oxygen and to keep his blood circulating.
1001.
Headquarters is getting the paramedics.
Good.
4.
In CPR, circulation is accomplished by rhythmic pressure over the lower half of the breastbone. This compresses the heart, pumping blood to vital organs.
1004, 1005.
Continue until normal breathing has started again. It might take a while, so don't give up. If you get tired, switch positions or have other rescuers take over. To do CPR correctly, you need special training. You can get it in a CPR course in your community. That lineman was fortunate. His crew members got that training and saved his life. Negligence, whether it's our fault or others, is one of the main causes of industrial accidents. In this electroplating plant, the foreman finds the solution in a tank weak and sends a worker to the yard for more acid. Acid that can eat metal.
Put your glove on. Come on, go in. Eric, come on, give me a hand. You gotta get in that shower. Joe, call emergency. Tell him we got an acid burn over here. Okay.
A major rule of first aid is don't become a victim yourself. If you rescue someone, do it safely with the right equipment. In this case, rubber gloves. The most important thing in treating chemical burns is to get the victim's clothes off and to get him under a shower as fast as possible. Keep the victim under the shower for at least 5 minutes, even longer. You can't stay under too long.
Eric, go to the first aid station and get some sterile dressings and a couple of towels and a safety blanket. And break out that stretcher. Right. Here, you stay under here.
Everyone should know where safety equipment and first aid kits are.
That's enough of that. Here, come on, let's get out of this. Come on, you're gonna get you dried off. Put you on the stretcher and take you a little ride.
Yeah, you're going to be all right, though. We got you washed off in time. You're going to be fine.
Large sterile dressings or clean towels can be used to blot the burns dry and to cover them for protection from further contamination. Don't disturb any tissue and don't put on any ointments. Shock often follows severe burns. Treat for it by keeping the victim's body temperature normal.
Let's get his feet elevated, too.
Elevating the feet will help circulation.
Hey, don't worry, pal. You're going to be okay.
Oh, Eric, I'm cold,
Heat can cause burns too. Remove clothing that may be smoldering. But don't try to remove clothing that adheres to the wound. Synthetic fibers may melt right into the body tissues. Make sure the victim can breathe properly. Inhaling flames, smoke, or very hot air can damage the breathing passages. Wheezing, hoarseness, burns on the face and neck, singed hairs in the nose, soot in the mouth are signs of imminent breathing problems. These can cause the airway to swell up and keep the victim from breathing. To make breathing easier, have a victim with face burns sit up or prop him up. If needed, give artificial respiration. Next, stop any serious bleeding. Remember, burn wounds don't bleed, so any blood must come from another wound. Keep in mind that burn injuries do not usually cause unconsciousness, even for a burn covering 100% of the body surface. After checking for breathing and other injuries, cover the wound with a dry cloth as clean as possible. If there is a delay in medical aid, elevate the burned arm or leg higher than the heart to reduce swelling.
Come on, Deb, we gotta hurry this one. They want this air duct by 5 o'clock. Oh, and I gotta drive my kid to his Little League game.
Boy, you don't miss any of his games, do you?
Tonight's the important one. You see, if they win tonight, they get to go to the playoffs. Debbie!
Well, get this off her wrist.
Your priority is to stop bleeding. First, try direct pressure. If there's no compress available, use your hand. Unless there's evidence of a fracture, elevate the wound higher than the heart to slow down bleeding.
Let's go get some clean towels, Paul. Hurry.
It's important to keep a cool head and try to calm the victim.
Relax. It'll be okay.
Unless there's evidence of a fracture, elevation of the wound higher than the heart will slow down bleeding. Apply direct pressure on the wound with a clean compress. And don't forget to send for medical aid.
Falling a compress out of it. Fold it over.
If the first compress soaks through, put a new one over it. Don't take the first one off. You don't want to disturb any clotting that started.
She's still bleeding.
If direct pressure on the wound and elevation won't stop the bleeding, apply pressure on the artery at the appropriate pressure point. There are pressure points on the arteries that supply blood to each arm and leg. Pressing the artery here against the bone can stop the blood flow to the wounded limb. Press the artery against the bone with your fingers. Remember, this method cuts off most of the circulation to the limb, so it should only be used if direct pressure and elevation can't control the bleeding. Don't use it any longer than necessary.
It's not working. You should put a tourniquet on her.
No tourniquet, Raleigh.
He's right. Tourniquets are dangerous to the limb and rarely needed. Because they cut off all blood supply to the limb, you run the risk of losing it. Using a tourniquet means you've decided to sacrifice the limb to save the life.
Okay, Debbie, it's all right now. That's going to take you to the hospital. You're going to be okay, Debbie. We'll call your husband. It's all right. Take care. Okay, guys.
Where did you learn to do all that stuff anyway?
Well, I took a first aid class taught by the Red Cross.
I saw all that blood and Debbie screaming. Oh, thank God you knew what to do, Bob.
Well, thanks, Bob. But listen, what would have happened if I wasn't around, huh? I mean, say I was out sick or on vacation or something. What would have happened to Debbie? She would have bled to death by the time the paramedics arrived. That's why you guys should know all about first aid, too.
We all should know the basic principles of industrial first aid.
And don't forget to give them the address here.
Determine the nature of the injury and call for trained emergency help. Know your plant's procedures and the emergency phone numbers. Always give the location of the accident to the paramedics. Learn where your plant's safety equipment and safety showers are located. Keep in mind where the first aid kits are and how to use them. Avoid moving a victim unless his life is threatened by remaining there.
His back may be broken.
Here, get the shirt off of him. Quick, come on.
When you rescue someone, do it carefully so you don't become a victim yourself.
Eric, put your gloves on. Give me a hand. You gotta get in your shower. Let's move it.
In a serious accident, first open the airway and check for breathing and pulse. If there's a pulse but no breathing, administer mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. If there's neither pulse nor breathing, give CPR.
5, 6.
Control severe bleeding with direct pressure on the wound. If that doesn't work, apply pressure at the appropriate pressure point.
Okay, Debbie, it's all right.
Tourniquets are a last resort.
Get this bleeding stopped.
Always treat for shock. Keep the victim still and maintain normal body temperature.
Oh, there we go.
Accidents do happen. And when one does, it's too late to learn first aid. You've got to know right then what to do and how to do it. We are responsible for our fellow workers' safety and well-being. Someday, you may have to save a life. Someday, someone might have to save yours.
I can check that gear in a minute, so don't touch anything, okay? Hey! Get down from there! Now! Hey! Turn it over!
What if it bumped that control by accident? You'd be mincemeat by now. What have I told you? You don't work on equipment when the engine's running.
Well, I told him not to touch anything. All right, I guess I wasn't thinking.
You weren't thinking? You mean you'll work on engines and machinery and not think of your own personal safety? Here. Shake hands with danger.
Shake hands with danger. Meet a man you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety. Now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. I was young and feisty, never did things by the book. Just let me get my toolbox and I'll take myself a look. I climbed up on a dozier with my mechanic's pride. Said, you can keep it running, friend, while I poke around inside. Shake hands with danger, meet a guy you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety, now they call me Three-Fingered Joe. Although I learned a lesson, I forgot it soon enough. The nicks and burns and scratches showed the young ones I was tough. Till another morning I was grinding on some steel. My other hand got careless and fed my skin into the wheel. Shake hands with danger, step right up and say hello. Grinding wheels and metal are what made me Three-Fingered Joe. I've seen mechanics burning, and I've seen them take a fall just to save themselves a minute. I've seen them lose it all. I've watched them courting trouble, seen them take a chance and lose. They get careless for a moment and spend a lifetime with the blues. Shake hands with some friends I used to know. Compared to them, I'm lucky to be just Three-Fingered Joe.
A lot of mileage out of that short, that reimagining of the "Shake Hands with Danger" song. But man, that previous film was pretty awesome. Lots of fake gore, that kind of electronic 80s soundtrack made in 1985 had a kind of a slasher vibe to it, which I'm a big fan of. But thanks for tuning in today. Very much appreciate it. Appreciate your comments and your eyeballs. We will be back, even though Monday is a holiday for many people. It's not a holiday for me. I'm going to come back and we're going to watch some more films because that's what we do. We have so many to watch. So many. So if you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up, hit the like button. You can hit the super thanks button, which will donate a little bit of money to us via YouTube. You can also go to ko-fi.com/avgeeks. You can get us some coffee, some delightful coffee that we drink. That is our drug of choice here at AV Geeks. And then you can go to patreon.com/avgeeks and donate there. You can also just go to our YouTube channel and just watch videos that we've posted. And we've posted more than 5,000. And there's ads. It's annoying. But we get a couple of pennies every time you watch and skip through an ad. So that's another way you can contribute and support us. Another way, of course, is just tell other people what we're doing. Share what you have experienced with others. Everybody have a great weekend, and we will see you soon. As a reminder, please rewind and love each other, and we will be back on Monday. Enjoy.